She had the world at her fingertips.
She was very outgoing, very fearless. She was just a smart young lady.
The sky was the limit.
And it looked like she'd found the love of her life, too.
She introduced him to the family.
She was taken with this guy. She loved him.
Until tragedy stole her too soon.
Blood was coming out her mouth.
911, do you need police?
Just a roller coaster of emotions surged through my body.
Detectives moved quickly to identify a suspect.
The name came from another resident that did not want to be identified.
He wanted something more than friendship.
And the killer's explanation would be full of excuses.
He said he woke up in a haze.
The drugs made him go crazy.
But were they also enough for him to get away with murder?
It was a slap in the face.
It'll never be okay. He knew exactly what he was doing.
We're just friends.
October 2nd, 2015. It's Friday night in Charlotte, North Carolina, a thriving metropolis of more than 2 million.
Charlotte, North Carolina is a really big city and it's growing every day.
It's a great town. It has a growing financial sector, which is really driving a lot of people to the area.
Although like any city, parts of Charlotte still struggle.
Some of the city's challenges are definitely crime, and education is another one of those real serious issues.
The city's growth had also made safe, affordable housing very hard to find.
It's 9:30 that night when Brittany Mayfield returns to the apartment where she lives with her daughter and sister.
The apartment was in a new complex built by the local housing authority.
The neighborhood, for the most part, was a quiet, family-oriented neighborhood.
Lexi is Brittany's little sister, 23-year-old Alexia Mayfield.
Alexia had recently moved into the apartment with her sister. While sister went to work, she would watch the child.
I called maybe an hour before I got off. She didn't answer the phone, so I thought maybe, of course, she probably asleep.
Inside, Brittany finds her daughter in the living room.
Brittany's baby was peacefully asleep.
Lexi?
Then, careful not to wake the baby, Brittany heads back to her sister's bedroom.
Lexi.
She found her sister on the floor.
She see blood coming from Lexi's mouth. She tapped her. She wasn't moving, but her body wasn't cold, it was warm.
In a panic, Brittany calls 911 in hopes they can save her sister. But will it be too late? Outgoing 23-year-old Alexia Mayfield was always the center of attention.
People gravitated toward her. I was a quiet one. Lexi was the outgoing one, always loud, laughing, goofy.
Alexia was the life of the party. You never had a dull moment being around her. She's very bright, smart, funny.
She was very fearless. She spoke her mind. Even though I'm the oldest, Lexi was more like the backbone, really.
After graduating high school in 2010, Alexia enrolled in an online college with the goal of becoming a pharmacy technician.
That's what she wanted to hone in on. And so we would go to the different places like CVS and see what their availabilities were. And she talked about it all the time. She was real excited.
Alexia was very ambitious and driven.
She wanted to make something of herself. That was her main goal. School was her #1 priority.
She was just a smart young lady. She loved learning.
With Lexi, the sky was the limit.
But no matter how high she soared, Lexi stayed close to her sister, Brittany. In 2014, the sisters moved in together, renting an apartment near the Charlotte airport.
Brittany was about to have a baby, and Alexia was looking forward to being a new aunt.
Lexi loved her niece very much, and her niece loved her.
However, a budding career and a new address weren't the only changes on the horizon for Lexi.
Hey, beautiful.
You talking to me?
What's up?
She told me that she was just walking down the street close to where she and her sister lived at the time. He pulled up beside her.
He was 25-year-old Emmanuel Felton.
There was definitely a spark there. They had a great conversation, and you could see that it was going to lead to something else.
She came back saying, I met this dude. So the relationship started from that point. He seemed to really love her, and she loved him, and she made that so clear. She made it so clear how she felt about Emmanuel.
She said, I have somebody that loves me just as much as I love him.
Before long, the couple was starting to think about taking the next step.
Emmanuel called me one afternoon, and he laid out this plan of how he was going to ask Alexia to marry him. Talked about the ring, the whole 9 yards.
But the big proposal never happened.
She just kept saying things just not sitting right. She felt like this wasn't the right relationship.
Alexia decided to break things off with the intentions that they could remain friends. Emmanuel agreed.
After the breakup, Alexia threw herself back into her studies, with no intention of dating again so soon. But fate had other plans.
Alexia had a friend named Jaden that she had known years before she even met Emmanuel.
Around the time things had fizzled with Emmanuel, Alexia and Jaden Young had reconnected.
He was smart, he was funny, he was the kind of guy that everybody enjoyed being around.
He was like Alexia in that he never met a stranger. And they seemed to have a lot of fun together.
And with Alexia almost finished with school, some hoped there might still be a big engagement in her future.
He left a great impression on everyone.
I was really taken by him. I loved him as though he were the son that I never had.
But now Alexia's future hangs in the balance.
Her sister has just found her unconscious and unresponsive inside of her apartment.
911.
She's not getting up, she's not moving.
She was covered in blood.
I remember Brittany telling me that she thought maybe she had fell and hit her head.
But when EMTs arrive on the scene, there's nothing they can do for Alexia.
Alexia was pronounced deceased at that time.
And it's quickly clear that her death is no accident.
First responders make a shocking discovery. Alexia has been shot.
She had sustained at least 2 gunshot wounds.
She had been murdered.
No.
"23-year-old Alexia Mayfield was on the verge of great things.
Alexia was looking forward to graduating with her pharmacy technician certification.
She also had a promising new relationship with a guy named Jaden Young.
The future appeared bright for Alexia.
But now, after Alexia's sister found her collapsed on the floor inside their apartment, EMTs have just pronounced her dead from at least 2 gunshot wounds.
Her body was found face down, so her sister could not tell that there were bullet wounds initially.
Never did she assume when she first came in the house, like, oh, my sister's dead.
When detectives arrive on the scene, they immediately begin to process the evidence.
We located 2 .380 caliber shell casings in the bedroom beside the victim.
There was no weapon at the scene, so that led the police to rule out suicide.
But why had this young woman ended up dead? Given the area, detectives first consider the possibility that this was a random crime.
While the city is growing, and that's great for the economy, an increase in population can also lead to an increase in the crime rate.
Crime is definitely on the rise. Violent crime is on the rise.
And Alexia's neighborhood was no exception.
This could have been a robbery gone wrong.
However, a look around the scene quickly rules out that theory.
There were no signs of forced entry, and nothing was missing.
They found a tablet and a set of keys in Alexia's bedroom, so it didn't look like the killer had tried to take anything.
Instead, evidence at the crime scene suggests that whoever killed Alexia wasn't an intruder.
Detectives found a pizza box on the kitchen table, along with 2 half-empty glasses.
There was an empty bottle of bourbon,
which let the police officers know that there was someone else who had been in the apartment that evening, someone who Alexia knew.
Hoping that she might know who that someone was, detectives turned to Alexia's sister, Brittany.
Brittany was waiting outside while EMTs checked out her daughter. Even though she appeared to be unharmed, they wanted to be sure before releasing her.
We know this is hard, but we really need your help if we're going to be able to find out who did this.
I'll try.
Brittany lost not only just her sister, but also her best friend.
Detectives begin by asking Brittany when she had last spoken to her sister.
I spoke to Alexia a couple times earlier when I was at work.
We talked periodically throughout the day. I would call and check up on her and my baby, see what they were doing.
Hey, what's up, girl? Hey, Lexi. Did she eat yet? Yeah, she had a good dinner. She's in the packing plate now, getting sleepy.
Lexi sound normal, sound happy.
But Brittany says that around 8 o'clock, Alexia stopped responding.
The phone just keep going straight to voicemail. She kept saying, that's not like her because she got my baby. I don't know what's going on, but I'm kind of worried. And then she was like, maybe I'm just worried for nothing.
I thought maybe she was just asleep.
When she first went in the house, she was like, girl, wake up.
But Alexia wasn't asleep.
No.
That's when she came to reality, like something else has happened.
Now it's up to detectives to determine exactly what that was.
We know this is very hard for you, ma'am. Is it a possibility that your sister may have gotten mixed up with some kind of trouble?
No, she was never in the streets or anything like that.
It wasn't like it was her past or her situation caught up with her.
Brittany also doesn't know for certain who could have come over that night.
Alexia didn't tell her she was expecting company.
However, Brittany does give detectives one possibility.
Alexia had recently started dating a gentleman named Jaden.
Were there any kind of problems between them that you're aware of?
No, sir.
He was very gentle with Alexia. He showed her nothing but respect.
Are there any ex-boyfriends we may need to talk to?
Well, there's Emmanuel.
Brittany gave us some backstory of that relationship, that the victim had recently broken up with Emmanuel.
Was there any bad blood between them?
I don't think so. I mean, they still hung out from time to time.
Emmanuel seemed to be okay with the breakup, and they seemed to be on good terms.
As far as the relationship being rocky, I didn't feel like that's what it was at all.
Thank you very much. We'll be in touch.
Brittany's statement doesn't give detectives much to go on, and neither does a canvass of the neighbors in Brittany's building.
We talked to a couple neighbors who earlier in the evening had heard a disturbance of some type coming from the apartment. They weren't sure what it was, but they did not call police.
But just when it looks like they're at a dead end, one of the building's security guards approaches detectives with what appears to be an important tip.
That security officer approached and gave us a name.
He says that the detective should check out a guy named Mark Briggs.
He said that name came from another resident that did not want to be identified.
They wanted to remain anonymous, so they didn't want to talk to the officers directly.
And according to the security guard, the neighbor had a good reason to remain anonymous.
Apparently, Mark Briggs was a dangerous criminal.
A security guard at the crime scene has just come forward and given detectives the name of a possible suspect in Alexia Mayfield's murder. A man named Mark Briggs.
The guard said that he had gotten the name from a resident of the apartment complex who had wanted to remain anonymous.
They didn't want to give us any information, didn't want to talk to us, but had provided that name to the security officer.
According to the informant, Mark Briggs was another resident of the complex who apparently had a thing for Alexia.
The informant had also suggested that Mark was dangerous.
When detectives head back to the station and run Mark's name through their database, it appears that there may be something to the tip.
It turned out that he had a fairly extensive criminal record.
Most are petty theft and drug charges, but others raise red flags for detectives.
Mark has several domestic battery charges on his record.
There's also firearm violations.
When detectives bring Mark into the station first thing the next morning, he appears distraught about Alexia's death.
We assume that you're aware that Alexia Mayfield was murdered last night.
Everybody's talking about it. Can't believe that she's really gone.
Yeah, we heard you had a thing for her.
I guess you'll call it that.
He admits that they had become friends and that he wanted something a little bit more than friendship with her.
She was so pretty. She was always so nice.
But you guys never...
Nah.
Did you ask her out after she broke up with Emmanuel?
Yeah. She was seeing some other guy.
He realized that Alexia just wasn't into him like that. He backed off, and they remained friends.
But detectives wonder, how did Mark take getting turned down a second time?
So did that make you feel some type of way, seeing her with someone else?
I'm sorry.
Mark says he was okay being friends.
Although detectives wonder if they were still friends, maybe it was Mark who'd spent the evening with Alexia shortly before her murder.
Maybe he'd tried to make a move, and things got out of hand.
When's the last time you saw Alexia?
Yesterday.
He said they had met up earlier that afternoon for coffee just to catch up.
At any point yesterday were you in her apartment?
No. But y'all think I had something to do with this? Listen, if y'all really want to know what happened to Alexia, I need to go question a new guy, Jaden.
Why is that?
He says that Alexia had been complaining about her relationship, that Jaden had become more controlling and more jealous.
Jealous enough that he'd followed her?
Maybe he was angry about Alexia hanging out with Mark and had confronted her about it.
Or was it possible Mark was making the whole thing up?
He could just be trying to throw them off of his tracks.
However, when police ask Mark where he was the previous night, he has an alibi ready.
Mark says that he went out to dinner with some friends, and later on they went to a club.
Detectives will need to follow up on Mark's alibi. But first, they contact Alexia's new boyfriend, Jaden Young.
They figure it's about time to bring Jaden in for questioning, too.
Since he was involved with Alexia at the time, they needed to rule him out.
So when did you find out that Alexia had been killed?
Last night. Her mother called me and I came straight over.
When Alexia was shot and killed, I was over to the apartment and Jaden walked in. Jaden walked in. And he felt it. He felt his knees. And he said, "Mama, I'm so sorry." He said, "Mama, I'm so sorry." His sentiment and his sincerity brought me so much comfort.
But was it guilt or grief that evoked such a strong response to Alexia's death?
Do you know a guy named Mark Briggs?
Yeah, he lives over there near Alexia.
You know, she met up for coffee yesterday afternoon, right?
Yeah, she might have mentioned it.
He never really sweated it because her and Mark were just friends.
He also claimed that things weren't all that serious between him and Lexi.
He said they had talked about stepping it up eventually once Alexia got out of school, but they just weren't really there yet.
Alexia was a die-hard student. She wanted to get her education.
You own a gun, Jaden?
No, sir.
Where were you at last night?
I was working. At least until Lexi's mother called me.
He said he was air service.
When detectives follow up with the rideshare service, their records confirm Jaden's alibi.
It appears that he was busy downtown and on the opposite side of Charlotte all evening.
But while Jaden's alibi checks out, when detectives speak to Mark's friends, what they learn puts him back on the suspect list.
It seems that he met up with his friends for dinner around 6:30. They left the restaurant around 8:30, and they didn't meet back up at the club until about 10:30. So that gives about an hour-and-a-half window where Mark could have committed the crime.
He was definitely a person of interest.
After his alibi falls apart, detectives consider Alexia Mayfield's friend and neighbor, Mark Briggs, a possible suspect in her murder.
Not only did he have a violent history, he admitted that he had feelings for Alexia.
Maybe Mark had been pressing for something more, and maybe he got angry when Alexia rejected him.
Since detectives couldn't account for his location for more than an hour around the time of the murder, he definitely could have had the opportunity to kill her.
But after detectives dig deeper, Mark's window of opportunity appears to close.
When detectives subpoena Mark's phone records for that evening to see whether he was in the vicinity of Alexia's apartment, it shows that he was pretty much in downtown Charlotte the entire night of the murder.
There was no indication that he had called or texted Alexia at any point that evening asking to come over.
It's not enough to rule him out completely, but it does suggest that he wasn't Alexia's killer.
However, a review of Alexia's phone records does reveal that she had been in contact with someone else prior to her death.
It seems as though she received several text messages in the hours leading up to the murder.
Detectives trace the number back to Alexia's former boyfriend, Emmanuel Felton.
He was going to be bringing some items over, returning them to her. One of those items being a tablet-style computer, also some keys. Those items were found in the apartment.
That's not the only indication that Emmanuel had come by either.
There was a text message that said that he was here, and we took that to mean that he was at the apartment.
When detectives run a background check on Emmanuel, there's no history of domestic violence.
They don't find anything other than a couple of minor possession charges.
However, they do find something that raises a red flag.
He had, in 2013, applied for a concealed handgun permit.
His application was denied, but the reason it was denied really raised some concerns.
He indicated that he had sought or received mental health treatment, but he would not sign a HIPAA release in order to obtain mental health records.
Detectives needed to find out what kind of mental health issues Emmanuel had been dealing with, and if they played any role in Alexia's death.
Detectives are wondering if he managed to get his hands on a gun despite his denial for a gun permit.
The next question is, why would Emmanuel have wanted to harm Alexia? Detectives learn more about the couple's relationship when they speak to her close friend, Constance Williams.
We was more like sisters. She would confide in me.
Yes.
Constance tells detectives that Alexia had seemed happy with Emmanuel at first.
Lexi did love him. She introduced him to the family.
However, Constance also says that as the relationship progressed, friends and family saw less and less of Lexi.
She wasn't coming around as much. She would start taking the back seat more like, oh girl, I can't. Oh, maybe next time. This wasn't the Lexi that I know. So I kept saying and asking her like, Lexi, are you okay?
Constance says Lexi had eventually confessed that things with Emmanuel weren't going well.
Alexia shared that Emmanuel was very controlling and jealous, and he did not want her hanging out with any of her old friends.
She would confide in me like, girl, I'm just aggravated. I'm frustrated with this relationship.
But she also had a hard time walking away.
Alexia really loved Emmanuel.
Lexi kept saying she wanted to get out this relationship. Then next thing you know, she'd be like, oh, well, we're back on good terms. We're back together. Everything is okay.
However, the relationship continued to spiral out of control.
Emmanuel's behavior became increasingly irrational.
He would become agitated, kind of irrational.
Emmanuel even accused her of cheating on him, which Alexia vehemently denied.
She felt like something was wrong with him. She just couldn't put her hands on it. She just kept saying he was kind of crazy.
According to Constance, Alexia never uncovered anything about Emmanuel's apparent struggles with mental illness, but she did learn something disturbing.
Alexia found out that Emmanuel had started using drugs.
She was like, when he's not on it, he's so nice, he's so sweet, but when he is on it, it was more of the bad than the good.
His substance abuse definitely contributed to his erratic behaviors and controlling ways.
Worst of all, Constance says that Emmanuel's drug use made him violent.
She confided in me that he was being abusive. And I know of 3 instances where he has physically abused her.
But after a year of dating, Alexia finally had enough.
Alexia really couldn't take the emotional roller coaster anymore.
She was like, I'm finally leaving him, girl.
Constance says that Emmanuel appeared to take the breakup surprisingly well.
Basically, Emmanuel was on his best behavior, just like he was any time she had threatened to leave him in the past.
She was like, even though they were splitting, they were still gonna be on good terms. And I just think things is looking up for the better.
Especially once Alexia reconnected with Jaden.
Lexi did not stay put. She didn't just sit there. She didn't just wait for him to come back around again. She would go and do her own thing.
And now detectives suspect that Lexi moving on was Emmanuel's motive for murder.
It was just basically jealousy.
He chose to do the unthinkable.
It was just, if I can't have you, nobody else can.
We're not together.
Detectives trying to solve Alexia Mayfield's murder have reason to suspect the killer is her ex-boyfriend, 25-year-old Emmanuel Felton.
It's obvious from the phone records and text messages that he had been in communication with Alexia that evening and possibly was at the apartment.
One of Alexia's friends had also reached out to detectives with information about Emmanuel's past abuse.
I've seen hands-on physical abuse, emotional abuse. She kept telling me, girl, he's getting so controlling too. It's beyond bearable.
During the breakup, he had come to the apartment, he had returned the items, and something had happened after that point. He was the sole suspect.
But now that detectives have a prime suspect, they have to find him.
We began collecting information on Emmanuel Felton, finding out where he lives, his background information, where he might be.
Next, detectives subpoena Emmanuel's cell phone records, which reveal his whereabouts on the night of the murder.
We obtained his cell phone records showing that he was at the scene when the incident happened.
Detectives have less luck tracking down Emmanuel's current location.
It looked like he might have turned his phone off after the murder because they weren't able to track him anymore.
It took him a little while to find Emmanuel. It took him a while.
In the end, it's a relative that gives up Emmanuel's location.
We get a phone call to 911 from a gentleman who says his cousin has come to his apartment. He's very upset, and he thinks that he's wanted for a homicide that had occurred.
The man said that he was Emmanuel Felton's cousin.
Within minutes, police arrive at the cousin's address.
Given that Emmanuel was possibly armed and apparently in a fragile mental state, it wouldn't have been hard for things to go wrong.
Police are aware that sometimes suspects set themselves up for a suicide by cop situation. So law enforcement was concerned that that might be what was happening here.
But when they find Emmanuel huddled on the floor, it's obvious he's not looking for a fight.
He's sitting on the apartment floor, back against the wall, knees up, kind of head down in his hands. He's very upset, kind of spaced out.
Hey, Emmanuel.
I just sit down, start having a conversation with him, and ultimately he says he will come to the law enforcement center and let us conduct an interview.
Emmanuel gave up without any resistance. He went along peacefully.
Emmanuel remains cooperative once down at the station and inside the interview room.
Part of the interview was just kind of getting a rapport with him, getting him talking. We talked about a lot of things, his history, where he's from, things he wanted to do with his life, and then began to talk to him more about having issues with the victim, Alexia.
Hey, I love that girl. She was never faithful.
He was obsessed with the fact that she was cheating on him. There's no evidence to say that, but in his mind, he thought she was cheating on him. And he would confront her about that, and she would say, "Oh, you're crazy, I'm not doing anything." His big thing was he didn't like being called crazy. And that would essentially set him off.
Despite that, Emmanuel claims that on the night of the murder, he'd gone over to the apartment, hoping to patch things up with Alexia once more.
He wanted to bring the personal items that he kept after they broke up. He said he also brought her several gifts to apologize for how he had been behaving.
I'm sorry I got so angry.
I appreciate that.
They were having a good time, eating some pizza and drinking a little bourbon.
But at some point, things took a deadly turn.
Most likely, Emmanuel suggested they get back together, or he might have even tried to make a move on Alexia.
No, Emmanuel, no.
The conversation became heated. He became angry.
I felt like he knew that this time it was over.
So what happened? I don't know.
His whole story was that he blacked out. He doesn't remember.
Are you serious? No, we're not together. What are you talking about?
According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, more than 51 million Americans struggled with mental health problems in 2019. While only 4% of violent crimes in the U.S. can be attributed to people with mental illness, 37% of incarcerated adults have been diagnosed with a mental health condition. Emmanuel Felton has surrendered to detectives investigating the murder of his ex, 23-year-old Alexia Mayfield.
Officers begin to question him, and Emmanuel admits that he went over to Alexia's apartment that night.
He was, quote unquote, dropping her clothes off. That's how he got access to the apartment.
However, Emmanuel claims not to know how Alexia died.
His whole thing was that he didn't remember what happened. He had blacked out. He wasn't sure he had done anything to anyone, that he had hurt anyone.
You don't remember shooting Alexia?
I was messed up.
He was saying he didn't remember because he was hazed because of drugs.
Emmanuel tells police that he had been on a 7-day drug binge prior to the murder.
You shot her, Emmanuel, twice.
She's dead because of you.
Oh, God.
He breaks down crying, saying that he never meant to hurt her. It's just that the drugs made him go crazy.
He ultimately admitted that he remembered firing one shot that struck Alexia and then left the apartment. He said he woke up in a haze driving his car. He had a gun on him and he threw it out the window.
Emmanuel's confession is more than enough for detectives to file charges, even if they don't believe much of it.
I believe he entirely knew what he was doing and what had happened. At the conclusion interview, he was charged with first-degree murder.
When friends and family learn of Emmanuel's arrest, they agree with the detective's suspicion that Emmanuel's blackout story is a lie.
There's no doubt in my mind. Emmanuel Felton came to the house that night with the intentions on killing her, because he normally doesn't carry a gun on him. He got the gun from somebody. He was like, if I can't have you, can't nobody else have you.
Many women who try to flee and leave in volatile and violent situations of domestic violence end up dying. The statistics are astounding. It's an astronomical amount of people.
Still, family and friends are glad Alexia's killer is in custody.
It was relief. We were grateful. We were happy, but we were still sad at the same time. Just because he's arrested, that doesn't bring Lexi back.
I was relieved, but I really wanted to go and talk to him so that I could understand how this man who said he loved my daughter so much could do something so dastardly, something so cowardly. How could he have done such a thing?
The only thing that I still want to know is why. Why?
But in the end, Alexia's family will never get the answers they deserve.
With his trial approaching, Emmanuel's attorneys approached prosecutors about a possible plea deal.
Emmanuel's attorney pushes the drug binge theory to argue for a more lenient sentence.
He was on a 7-day binge from what they said, but I really think he said that to make his story sound more sympathetic.
Before the trial is set to begin, the defense and prosecutors make a deal.
He ultimately took a plea deal and pled to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 16 years in prison.
And I thought 16 years, why? And the lawyer had explained because Emmanuel was dealing from a diminished capacity because he'd spent so much time doing drugs. If he had gone to court, if there was a trial, there would have been a possibility that he could get less time. And of course, nobody wanted that.
Not that everyone finds the outcome satisfying.
16 years is not long enough.
16 years for the cold-blooded murder of a young lady who had nothing but a bright future ahead of her, to me, does not seem fair. I would have argued for a much longer sentence, a much stricter, harsher sentence.
Emmanuel all but got away with murder.
And he will eventually get a second chance at life that Alexia never will.
Emmanuel Felton get to hear his family every day, get to talk to his family, get to see his family. We don't get that from Lexi.
I will never see my daughter on this side.
We would never get to hear Lexi's voice in person. We would never get to see Lexi face to face. That was robbed from us.
But Alexia's mother has made it her mission to ensure that her daughter didn't die in vain.
I've helped different people coordinate domestic violence conferences, and I'm in the process of doing that now. And if I were to share one thing concerning domestic violence, concerning volatile relationships, it would simply be to say, it's okay to love somebody, but never love anybody more than you love yourself. Never do that.
Abuse is never okay. If you or someone you love is in an abusive relationship, there is help available. Call the Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE.
Volume 1. The Shadow on Interstate 540. Chapter 1. A Cold Winter Morning. The morning sun rose slowly over the city of Raleigh, North Carolina, casting a pale, translucent glare across the frosted grass that lined the highway. It was Wednesday, January 30, 2008, at 7:30 in the morning. The air carried the sharp, biting chill of midwinter for the thousands of commuters making their daily trek along Interstate 540. The day began like any other, defined by the steady drone of engine noise, the rhythmic hum of tires against asphalt, and the muted haze of early daylight. Yet on this particular morning, the routine rhythm of the commute was abruptly broken. Drivers traveling westbound along Interstate 540 began slowing down as their eyes caught an unfamiliar sight along the grassy shoulder. Resting in the cold turf just beyond the guardrail lay the motionless body of a young woman. Her posture was unnatural, still, and completely out of place against the backdrop of morning traffic. Within moments, phone lines at the emergency dispatch center began ringing continuously as panicked motorists reported the discovery. When first responders and law enforcement officers arrived at the scene, they approached with the initial assumption that they might be dealing with a tragic pedestrian accident. It was not uncommon for a stranded driver or a confused pedestrian to be struck by a passing vehicle on such a busy stretch of highway. However, as the officers stepped closer and examined the young woman lying in the grass, that initial assumption evaporated instantly. This was no tragic traffic mishap. The victim was a young African-American woman, neatly dressed, but her body bore the horrific evidence of an extraordinary act of violence. She had been stabbed repeatedly across her face, her throat, her chest, and her upper torso. The attack had been ferocious and relentless. Major crime investigators were summoned to the scene immediately, recognizing that they were standing in the middle of a brutal murder investigation. The crime scene itself presented severe challenges. The grassy bank along Interstate 540 was expansive and exposed to the elements. There was no immediate sign of a murder weapon, no discarded knife gleaming in the frost, and no obvious physical tracks left by an assailant. The sheer volume of passing traffic meant that potential witnesses were moving at highway speeds, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding just yards away from their windshields. Officers began the tedious process of canvassing the highway corridor, systematically questioning motorists and searching for any detail, no matter how small, that might explain how the victim ended up on the side of the road. Among those caught in the morning traffic delay was a young man named Darren Curtis. It was approximately 7:45 in the morning when Darren found himself creeping along in the backed-up lanes of Interstate 540 on his routine drive to work. Curious about the delay, he looked toward the side of the highway and observed the blue tarp covering a body, surrounded by emergency vehicles and flashing lights. Darren continued driving slowly past the initial crime scene, just half a mile. Further down the road, his eyes caught sight of a white passenger car parked on the shoulder of the highway. His heart dropped. The vehicle bore an unmistakable resemblance to the car driven by his 21-year-old wife, Latrice Curtis. A sudden wave of panic washed over Darren. He pulled over, verified the vehicle registration, and realized with absolute certainty that the white car belonged to Latrice. Driven by frantic anxiety, Darren hurried back down the shoulder toward the active crime scene he had passed moments earlier. He approached the attending officers, his voice trembling as he explained that his wife's car was sitting parked down the road and that she had not returned home the previous night. Detectives gently sought identifying information from Darren. Within a short time, their worst fears were confirmed. The young woman lying beneath the blue tarp on the frozen embankment was indeed his wife, Latrice Curtis. The news hit the family like a physical blow when Latrice's father received the devastating telephone call informing him that his only daughter had been murdered. The reality seemed impossible to process. Latrice was just 21 years old, a promising college student with a bright future ahead of her. To her family, she was the joyful center of their lives, the youngest child and only girl in a household of brothers, blessed with an infectious smile, an outgoing personality, and an unwavering commitment to her education. For the investigators tasked with solving her murder, the central question hung heavily in the freezing morning air. Who could possibly harbor such profound hatred for a young woman who seemed to have no enemies? The sheer fury of the assault, evidenced by more than 40 sharp force wounds to her face, neck, and torso, suggested a crime born of intense, overwhelming passion or deep personal rage. A random robber does not inflict 40 stab wounds to take a handbag. This was an act executed with bitter, concentrated malice. Chapter 2: The Anatomy of a Marriage. To understand why Latrice Curtis died on a cold highway shoulder, investigators first had to look into the life she was building. Latrice had grown up surrounded by protective older brothers, developing a confident, personable charm that allowed her to connect effortlessly with anyone she met. She was driven academically, determined to make something extraordinary of herself. After completing high school, she enrolled in college in Raleigh, where during her very first semester, she crossed paths with an ambitious accounting student named Darren Curtis. Darren was a respectful, mature young man and a former National Guard soldier. Their initial meeting in a campus study area blossomed quickly into a sweet, studious romance. Darren won over Latrice's protective family with his polite demeanor and quiet discipline. To those who observed them, the couple seemed perfectly suited for one another. Just 1 year into their courtship, Darren proposed, and Latrice joyfully accepted. After their wedding, the newlyweds moved into a comfortable apartment together. Latrice transferred to North Carolina Central University in nearby Durham to pursue a degree in business administration. Her life seemed to be moving along a carefully planned trajectory toward success. She worked hard, balanced her studies, and maintained a close relationship with her husband and family. 9 months into their sacred vows, they appeared to be living a quiet, happy life. Yet, as major crime detectives began examining the blood-splattered scene where Latrice's body was recovered, the pristine facade of her world began to show subtle fractures. The initial processing of Latrice's body by crime scene technicians revealed crucial details. She had not succumbed easily. The condition of her hands and fingernails indicated she had engaged in a desperate, ferocious fight for her life against her killer. Her vocal cords, carotid artery, and jugular vein had been slashed, ensuring she could not cry out for help. Her fingernails were carefully bagged by evidence technicians to preserve any biological material she might have scraped from her assailant during her final struggle. Half a mile away, forensic technicians meticulously examined Latrice's abandoned white sedan. The interior of the car told a chaotic story. The center console was shattered, indicating a violent physical struggle had occurred within the tight confines of the front seats. Blood evidence was smeared across the driver's side door panel. More importantly, forensic sweeps of the vehicle yielded a critical piece of physical evidence: foreign DNA left on the steering wheel, suggesting that someone other than Latrice had operated the vehicle shortly before or after her death. In the early hours of the investigation, standard police procedure required detectives to closely examine the victim's husband. Darren Curtis was brought to the law enforcement station for a formal interview. Detectives asked him to unbutton his shirt and roll up his sleeves, searching his hands, arms, and torso for any cuts, scratches, or bruises that would inevitably result from a violent physical struggle. Darren showed no physical signs of injury. His skin was free of marks. He answered questions cooperatively, detailing his timeline from the previous evening. Darren explained that Latrice had called him around 10 o'clock on Tuesday night, letting him know she was running late from her classes planned to grab a bite to eat and would be late getting home. Darren went to bed around 11:30 in the evening. When he awoke the next morning, Latrice was not in the apartment. He called her cell phone at 7:30 in the morning, received no answer, left a brief voicemail, and proceeded on his usual route to work, where he unexpectedly encountered the backed-up traffic and spotted her car on Interstate 540. Darren voluntarily granted officers permission to search both his personal vehicle, and the couple's apartment. The searches yielded no evidence of violence, no blood traces, and no signs of a struggle. Physically and forensically, Darren Curtis appeared entirely clear of involvement. However, the autopsy report from the state medical examiner soon arrived, introducing a dramatic and startling turn into the case. During the post-mortem examination, medical examiners discovered an intact condom inside Latrice's body. Physical evidence indicated she had engaged in consensual sexual intercourse shortly before her death, as there were no traumatic injuries to her genital area consistent with a sexual assault. This discovery transformed the nature of the investigation. The presence of the condom proved that Latrice was keeping secrets. Beneath the surface of her quiet, studious marriage, a secret romantic life existed. To find the killer, investigators needed to identify the man who had been with Latrice in those final hours before her life ended on the shoulder of the highway. Chapter 3: Shadows in the Chapel. Subpoenas were promptly issued for the call logs of Latrice's cell phone. Detectives painstakingly analyzed every incoming and outgoing communication from the hours leading up to her death. The records verified Darren's statement. He had indeed called her at 10 o'clock the previous evening and again at 7:30 the following morning. But the phone logs revealed something far more compelling. In the late night hours, around midnight, just before Latrice was murdered, her phone engaged in a flurry of calls with a specific number. Detectives traced the owner of that phone number to a young man named Stephen Randolph. Stephen Randolph was a well-known, highly visible figure at North Carolina Central University. He was a tall, handsome student-athlete, a talented basketball player who harbored serious ambitions of playing professionally in the National Basketball Association. To those on campus, Randolph was a charming, eligible bachelor. Investigative inquiries revealed that Latrice and Stephen had met during the previous autumn semester in 2007. What had started as shared classes and casual campus conversations had quickly blossomed into a flirtatious connection, which eventually evolved into a passionate, clandestine extramarital affair. 2 days after Latrice's body was discovered, Stephen Randolph walked into the Wake County Sheriff's Office. He did not come alone. Accompanying him was his older housemate, a prominent local figure named Robert Lee Adams Reeves. Robert Reeves, 43 years old, was a well-respected figure in the Durham community. Known affectionately as the Bishop or Pastor Reeves, he was a charismatic evangelical minister, motivational speaker, and community leader who ran a local ministry. Reeves had taken the young basketball player under his wing months earlier when Randolph faced financial hardship, offering him a low-rent basement apartment in his home. When Randolph and Pastor Reeves entered the station, Reeves acted as a protective mentor, assuring officers that young Stephen wished to cooperate fully to clear his name. Detectives led Stephen Randolph into an interrogation room while Pastor Reeves waited nearby. Initially, Randolph downplayed his relationship with Latrice. claiming they were merely classmates who occasionally studied together.
But when?
Detectives presented the cell phone records and referenced the specific biological findings from the autopsy. Randolph's composure cracked. He admitted that he and Latrice had been involved in an intimate affair.
He
confessed that on the night of Tuesday, January 29, Latrice had visited his basement apartment at Pastor Reeves' house around 8 o'clock in the evening. They engaged in sexual intercourse, during which the condom became lodged inside her. Despite their efforts, they could not remove it. Randolph stated that Latrice left his residence around 10 o'clock in the evening, intending to resolve the issue at home. Randolph further explained that after Latrice departed, he left the house to clear his head and drove to the home of his primary girlfriend, Velma Newton. Arriving around 10 o'clock past midnight, he claimed that over the next few hours, Latrice called his cell phone repeatedly in a state of intense panic.
She
was terrified that she might become pregnant from the trapped condom and was overwhelmed by the prospect of returning home to her husband under such circumstances. Randolph insisted to detectives that he had nothing to do with her death, stating he was at Velma Newton's apartment during the time frame established by the medical examiner for Latrice's murder, which was estimated between 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. Detectives brought Pastor Robert Reeves into an interview room to verify details about the household environment and Randolph's timeline. Pastor Reeves, radiating polished composure, confirmed that Latrice had visited Randolph at their home that evening. Reeves stated that he himself had left the house at 8:15 in the evening to attend a midweek church service, returning home around 11:30. He reported that both Randolph's car and Latrice's car were gone when he returned. Reeves then offered an intriguing piece of information to the investigators.
He
noted that the following morning, Randolph had confided in him that Latrice wanted to escalate their casual affair into a serious, long-term relationship. To the detectives, this detail raised a potential motive.
Could Stephen
Randolph, standing on the precipice of a lucrative professional basketball career in the National Basketball Association, view an unexpected pregnancy and an emotionally demanding mistress as a catastrophic threat to his future?
An
unwanted scandal could derail his athletic ambitions entirely. Adding weight to this concern was a detail provided by Pastor Reeves regarding Randolph's personal possessions. Stephen owned a collection of decorative knives and swords that he kept in his room. The presence of a sharp-edged collection, combined with a potential pregnancy, panic, and an unverified late-night alibi, placed Stephen Randolph squarely in the crosshairs of the Homicide Squad. Chapter 4. The Thread Unravels. Equipped with a search warrant, investigators thoroughly searched Stephen Randolph's vehicle and basement apartment. They examined his collection of knives and swords, subjecting every blade to forensic testing. None of the weapons bore any trace of blood, tissue, or recent cleaning, nor did Randolph's car exhibit any signs of a violent encounter. Detectives then turned to Randolph's girlfriend, Velma Newton, to verify his alibi. Velma confirmed that Stephen had arrived at her apartment around 10 a clock on the night of the murder and remained with her until roughly 1 o'clock in the morning. However, because the medical examiner estimated Latrice's time of death between 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning, Randolph's window of opportunity remained technically open. During her interview, Velma Newton introduced a bizarre element into the investigation. She revealed that in the weeks leading up to the murder, both she and Stephen had been subjected to a campaign of anonymous, threatening phone calls. An unknown caller had repeatedly harassed them, demanding that Stephen end his various romantic pursuits and warning him that he would be severely hurt if he did not comply. Furthermore, Velma disclosed that shortly before the murder, Stephen had walked out to his car one morning to discover that all 4 of his tires had been slashed. This revelation confounded investigators. Was an unknown, vengeful stalker targeting Stephen Randolph? Had Latrice Curtis been caught in the crossfire of someone else's dangerous obsession? Before detectives could fully process this unexpected angle, a critical call arrived from State Trooper Isaac Cooper of the North Carolina State Highway Patrol. Trooper Cooper had been reviewing recent incident logs along Interstate 540 and remembered a routine encounter from the night of the murder. At approximately 1:30 in the morning on January 30, 6 hours before Latrice's body was discovered, Trooper Cooper was patrolling Interstate 540, searching for disabled motorists. He observed a vehicle parked on the eastbound shoulder with its hazard lights flashing. As he pulled behind it, he noticed another car parked directly across the median on the westbound shoulder, also operating its hazard lights. The vehicle on the westbound shoulder was a white passenger car matching the exact description of Latrice Curtis's vehicle. Trooper Cooper approached the car on the eastbound shoulder, but found it unoccupied. He ran the license plate through dispatch. Before he could cross the median to inspect the white vehicle on the westbound side, he was urgently dispatched to a severe traffic accident nearby and had to clear the scene. However, dispatch had completed the registration check on the eastbound vehicle and relayed the ownership details to Trooper Cooper's computer. The eastbound car parked on the shoulder of Interstate 540 at 1:30 in the morning, directly opposite Latrice's vehicle, did not belong to Stephen Randolph. It did not belong to Darren Curtis. It was registered to Pastor Robert Lee Adams Reeves. The investigation shifted dramatically. Why was the charismatic community pastor's personal automobile sitting on the shoulder of a dark highway at the precise hour and location where Latrice Curtis was brutally stabbed to death? Detectives immediately summoned Pastor Robert Reeves back to the station for detailed questioning. When confronted with the state trooper's report, Pastor Reeves maintained his polished, unbothered composure. He claimed the trooper must have been mistaken. Reeves insisted he had been at home sleeping all night and had never driven his vehicle onto Interstate 540 that evening. He casually suggested that perhaps his young roommate, Stephen Randolph, had taken his car without asking, noting that Randolph had access to a spare set of keys. Detectives sought to verify Reeves' alibi for the earlier part of the evening. Reeves had previously claimed he attended a church service from 8:15 until 11:30 on Tuesday night. Investigators contacted his sister, Willa Mae Thorpe, who attended the exact same church. Willa Mae Thorpe dropped a devastating truth on her brother's story. Pastor Reeves had not been at the church service that evening. He had lied about his whereabouts. With his alibi entirely dismantled, detectives re-examined Pastor Reeves with meticulous scrutiny. As he sat in the interview room, an investigator requested that he roll up his sleeves and unbutton his cuffs. Visible across Reeves' hands, forearms, and wrists were numerous fresh, deep scratches and skin abrasions. When asked to account for these physical injuries, Reeves offered a swift explanation. He claimed he and Stephen Randolph had moved a heavy wooden desk earlier that week and that he had fallen backward while navigating a doorway, scraping his arms against the frame. Detectives brought Stephen Randolph into a separate room and asked him about the desk-moving incident. Randolph looked baffled. He stated that moving the desk had been a routine, minor task, and that Pastor Reeves had suffered no fall, no accident, and no injuries whatsoever during the process. Randolph then decided to reveal a deeply unsettling secret regarding his landlord. Randolph disclosed that Pastor Reeves harbored a hidden, dark obsession. On one occasion, after Latrice had visited Randolph's basement apartment, Reeves had entered the room acting strangely. The pastor began asking Randolph explicit, invasive questions about his sexual activities. Reeves asked Randolph if he had ever considered working as a male escort maid, graphic inquiries regarding his anatomy, and asked if he had ever engaged in sexual acts with men. Ultimately, Pastor Reeves made a direct proposition to the young athlete. He offered to waive Randolph's monthly rent entirely if Randolph would perform sexual acts on him. Randolph had firmly rejected the pastor's proposition, causing Reeves to back away awkwardly. But shortly after that rejection, the mysterious, threatening phone calls to Randolph and Velma had begun, culminating in the slashing of Randolph's car tires. Detectives immediately subpoenaed Pastor Reeves' personal cell phone records. The records provided definitive proof: the anonymous, harassing phone calls made to Stephen Randolph and Velma Newton had been placed directly from Pastor Reeves' phone, using call-blocking features to mask his identity. The psychological profile of Pastor Robert Reeves suddenly crystallized before the investigative team. The revered community pastor was living a secretive, predatory double life. He had developed an intense, jealous fixation on his handsome young tenant. Unable to possess Randolph himself, Reeves had grown consumed with bitter hatred toward the young women who enjoyed Randolph's romantic attention. Background checks into Reeves' past revealed a disturbing history of predatory sexual behavior, including prior allegations of sexual assault involving young men. He had skillfully compartmentalized his identity, masking a predatory nature behind the respectable robes of an evangelical minister. Finally, the State Crime Laboratory completed its forensic analysis of the DNA. Evidence recovered from Latrice Curtis's white sedan the foreign biological material extracted from the interior door panel and steering wheel produced a conclusive match. It did not belong to Stephen Randolph. It did not belong to Darren Curtis. The DNA belonged to Pastor Robert Lee Adams Reeves. Chapter 5. The Judgment of the Court. On February 2, 2008, law enforcement officers officially arrested Pastor Robert Lee Adams Reeves and charged him with the first-degree murder of Latrice Curtis. The arrest reverberated throughout Durham and Raleigh, leaving the local religious community in profound shock. Many faithful congregants initially refused to believe the charges, convinced that the revered minister was the victim of a terrible law enforcement error. However, as the formal trial commenced on September 29, 2009, in a Raleigh courtroom, the prosecution laid out a devastatingly clear narrative of obsession, stalker tactics, and horrific violence. Prosecutors demonstrated that on the night of Tuesday, January 29, 2008, Pastor Reeves had observed Latrice Curtis arriving at his home to meet Stephen Randolph. Consumed by bitter jealousy, Reeves monitored their encounter. When Latrice left the house, carrying the emotional burden of the trapped condom and communicating frantically with Randolph by phone, Reeves pursued her in his vehicle, using his authority, a familiar vehicle, or by flashing his lights to simulate an emergency. Reeves induced Latrice to pull over on the dark shoulder of Interstate 540. Once both vehicles were parked along the highway median, Reeves confronted her. A violent struggle ensued inside her vehicle, shattering the center console as Latrice fought desperately for her survival. Reeves subdued her, dragged or forced her across the median into the grassy bank, and executed a horrific assault, stabbing her more than 40 times about her face, throat, and chest to ensure she could never return to the man he fixated upon. In his warped mind, eliminating Latrice was a means of removing an obstacle to Randolph's affection. During the trial, the defense team attempted to construct alternative theories. They argued that Stephen Randolph had the true motive to eliminate Latrice due to his fear of a career-ending pregnancy scandal. The defense emphasized that biological material belonging to Randolph was identified under Latrice's fingernails. However, prosecutors effectively dismantled this argument. They explained that Randolph's DNA under her fingernails was the direct result of their intimate sexual encounter hours prior, as confirmed by both Randolph and the forensic
timeline.
Conversely, Pastor Reeves had no legitimate reason whatsoever to have his DNA transferred onto the interior steering wheel and door panel of Latrice's personal vehicle, nor could he account for the severe physical scratches covering his forearms. When State Trooper Isaac Cooper testified regarding his identification of Reeves' vehicle parked directly across from Latrice's car on Interstate 540 at 1:30 in the morning, the defense's position collapsed entirely. Furthermore, Stephen Randolph took the witness stand, delivering straightforward testimony regarding the pastor's bizarre sexual proposition and subsequent harassment. observing the overwhelming mountain of physical, digital, and testimonial evidence. The support from local religious leaders in the courtroom evaporated completely. On October 7, 2009, the jury retired to deliberate. 2 days later, on October 9, they returned with their formal verdict. Robert Lee Adams Reeves was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The verdict brought a grim, necessary closure to a horrific tragedy. For Latrice's family and her husband Darren, the trial exposed the depths of a dark obsession that had stolen a vibrant, promising young woman on the threshold of her adult life. Justice was formally served, delivering the predatory minister from his elevated pulpit to the stark reality of a lifelong prison cell. Volume 2, The Fractured Badge. Chapter 6, The Midnight Call in Room 147. The city of Gainesville, Texas, lay quiet under the cover of late-night darkness. On Saturday, December 11, 2004, Gainesville was a calm, tight-knit municipality where midnight violence was an absolute rarity. Shortly past 4 o'clock in the morning, the night manager at a local motel received a disturbing internal telephone call from a guest staying in room 147. The caller's voice was faint, slurred, and barely audible, drifting off mid-sentence. Concerned for the guest's safety, the night manager walked down the outdoor corridor toward room 147. He knocked firmly on the door, calling out to the occupant, but received no coherent response, only faint, unintelligible groans from within. The manager attempted to use his master key, but discovered the deadbolt was engaged from the inside. Recognizing an emergency was unfolding, he summoned the motel maintenance technician, who brought tools to force the deadbolt and breach the door. When the door swung open into the darkened room, the two men encountered a harrowing sight. The room was in severe disarray. Lying on the carpet near the bed was a middle-aged African-American woman, curled in a fetal position. Blood was pooled around her head and smeared across the bedding. She was conscious, but completely dazed, incoherent, and slurring her speech. A closer inspection revealed a catastrophic injury, a gunshot wound to her forehead, just above her eye. Resting on the floor mere inches from her trembling hand was a small, silver, .25 caliber semi-automatic handgun. The motel manager rushed back to the front desk and dialed 911, reporting a guest with a gunshot wound to the head. Emergency medical. Technicians and local police officers responded to the scene within minutes. Upon arrival, officers prioritized medical intervention. Emergency medical. Technicians stabilized the victim and rushed her to a regional trauma center, recognizing that her chances of surviving a close-range cranial gunshot wound were extraordinarily slim. Meanwhile, investigating officers began securing room 147. A preliminary sweep revealed no other individuals present in the room. On the nightstand, officers observed several empty alcohol containers alongside packages of over-the-counter sleeping medication. The physical scene presented two distinct possibilities. Either the woman had attempted to end her own life in a tragic solo act, or she had been attacked by an assailant who had locked the door, engaged the deadbolt through a secondary means, and fled. The disarray of the room suggested a potential struggle, yet the proximity of the handgun to her body pointed toward a self-inflicted shooting. As officers processed her personal effects to establish her identity, the case instantly escalated from a localized motel shooting into a high-stakes, multi-jurisdictional police emergency. The injured woman was identified as 36-year-old Denise Miller. Upon running her name through regional police databases, Gainesville officers discovered that Denise Miller, along with her boyfriend, 37-year-old active duty police officer Wayne Irby, had been officially reported missing 24 hours earlier from the nearby town of Little Elm, Texas. Officer Wayne Irby was a 6-year veteran of the Little Elm Police Department. He had inexplicably failed to report for his scheduled morning shift the previous day, sparking widespread alarm throughout his department. Now his girlfriend was lying in a Gainesville hospital room with a bullet in her head, and Officer Irby was nowhere to be found. Chapter 7: The Veteran and the Fresh Start. To reconstruct the path that led to room 147, investigators turned their focus to the town of Little Elm, Texas, examining the intricate, turbulent history shared by Wayne Irby and Denise Miller. Denise Miller had grown up in Kansas City, Missouri. In her youth, she was widely popular, known for her outgoing, bubbly personality and warmth. She married her college sweetheart at age 22 and gave birth to 2 children, a daughter named Whitney in 1986 and a son named Walter 2 years later. However, after nearly a decade of marriage, her relationship fractured, resulting in a divorce in 1995. Seeking a clean slate and a peaceful environment to raise her children, Denise relocated to the growing suburb of Little Elm, Texas. In Little Elm, Denise built a prosperous life. She secured a lucrative management position with a regional liquor distribution firm, managed her finances prudently, and purchased a lovely home. To outside observers, she had achieved complete independence and success. Yet she still desired a committed partner to share her life. In 2003, that desire materialized when a patrol officer knocked on her front door. Officer Wayne Irby was a dedicated law enforcement officer who lived and breathed his profession, standing tall, physically strong, and possessive of an outgoing, charismatic personality. Wayne was a fixture in the Little Elm community. He made a point of engaging with residents on his beat, offering safety advice and establishing friendly rapport. On that initial afternoon, Wayne had noticed Denise's garage door standing open and stopped to advise her about neighborhood thefts. He handed her his business card, encouraging her to call if she ever needed assistance. It was not long before Officer Irby returned to her residence off duty. Charmed by her beauty and grace, Wayne asked Denise out on a date. Denise accepted, and their connection was immediate and intense. Wayne, a divorced father himself, quickly integrated into Denise's life. He bonded seamlessly with her teenage children, Walter and Whitney, acting as a supportive, fatherly figure. To friends and family, they appear to be forming a wonderful, blended family unit. However, beneath the charming exterior of their romance, deep romantic insecurities began to take root. Wayne Irby was immensely popular in the community, particularly among female residents. His outgoing demeanor and charm led many women to engage in frequent, friendly conversations with him while he was on patrol. For Denise, this dynamic created profound anxiety. Having endured the pain of a failed marriage, she developed intense, persistent suspicions regarding Wayne's fidelity. Denise began confronting Wayne regularly, accusing him of pursuing other women. On his beat, Wayne strongly denied the accusations, insisting his interactions were purely professional and friendly. But the repeated arguments began eroding the foundation of trust in their relationship. Despite these underlying tensions, the couple decided to take a major step forward in 2004 by purchasing a spacious house together in Little Elm. Yet living under the same roof amplified their conflicts rather than resolving. Denise's jealousy became increasingly pronounced, leading to frequent, tearful arguments. Overwhelmed by the constant suspicion, Wayne reached a breaking point in late 2004. He decided to end the cohabitation, renting a separate house across town to give himself space. The separation devastated Denise. Shortly after Wayne moved out, Denise unexpectedly lost her executive job at the liquor distribution company in November 2004. Observing her emotional and financial distress, Wayne's compassionate nature took over. He returned to the shared home to support Denise and her children, attempting once again to reconcile their relationship. It was during this fragile, high-stress period of reconciliation that tragedy struck. Chapter 8: The Quiet House on the Corner. At 6 o'clock in the morning on Friday, December 10, 2004, officers of the Little Elm Police Department gathered in their briefing room for the start of the morning shift. Officer Wayne Irby was absent. For the officers on duty, this was an immediate, alarming red flag. Wayne was famously punctual, often arriving early to prepare his equipment. Shift leaders called his cell phone repeatedly, but every attempt went directly to voicemail. Wayne never ignored his phone. By 11 o'clock in the morning, concern had turned to official alarm. Police Chief Waylon Rhodes dispatched patrol units to conduct a welfare check at the residence Wayne shared with Denise. Officers knocked firmly on the doors of the quiet suburban home. There was no answer. Neither Wayne's vehicle nor Denise's car was present in the driveway. The house was entirely secure, with all doors and windows locked. Officers then contacted Denise's teenage children at their school to gather information. Whitney and Walter informed officers that their mother had not come home the previous night. Whitney recalled receiving a brief, unusual cell phone call from her mother around midnight on Thursday. Denise had stated she was running errands, told Whitney that she loved her, and instructed the children to prepare themselves for school the following morning. Whitney noted that the tone of the call felt unsettlingly formal and out of character. Furthermore, repeated attempts by the children to reach their mother throughout Friday morning had gone unanswered. Recognizing that both Wayne Irby and Denise Miller were missing under highly irregular circumstances, Wayne's longtime patrol partner, Detective Jerry Walker, took action. Detective Walker, accompanied by Officer James Wynn, decided to inspect the rental home across town that Wayne had leased during his brief separation from Denise. They obtained a key from the property owner and arrived at the quiet rental house early Friday afternoon. Unlocking the front door, the officers called out Wayne's name as they stepped inside. The house was still and silent. In the kitchen, Detective Walker observed Wayne's personal fanny pack resting on the counter alongside his personal cell phone. Wayne went nowhere without his phone. The presence of these items immediately signaled that something was severely wrong. Officer James, when walked down the central hallway, turning a corner toward the rear bedroom. Suddenly, Officer Wynn stopped dead in his tracks, gasped, stepped backward, and held up his hand toward Walker, telling him to stop. Detective Walker moved past Wynn and looked into the hallway. Lying face down on the floor was Officer Wayne Irby. A dark pool of blood had gathered around his head. An initial physical inspection revealed a single, horrific injury, a gunshot wound located almost dead center in the back of his head. Wayne Irby was dead. The discovery sent shockwaves through the Little Elm Police Department. This was the first homicide involving an active officer in the department's memory, and the victim was one of their own. Investigators from the Denton County Sheriff's Office and the Texas Rangers were immediately summoned to process the crime scene. Forensic analysis revealed that Wayne had been shot a single time from behind at close range. There were no signs of a physical struggle in the home, no overturned furniture, and no defensive wounds on Wayne's body. The trajectory and placement of the bullet indicated he had been completely caught off guard, executed before he even realized an assailant was present. Initial investigative theories considered whether the murder was a retaliatory act linked to Wayne's police work. However, his colleagues noted that Wayne was exceptionally well-liked and had received no recent threats from subjects he had cited or arrested. Attention quickly returned to the whereabouts of Denise Miller. A search of Wayne's rental home revealed that his personal handguns were missing from the premises. Detectives then obtained entry into the primary residence shared by Wayne and Denise. Inside the master bedroom, officers found Wayne's official police uniform hanging neatly in the closet alongside his duty belt. However, the leather holster attached to his duty belt was completely empty. His official service firearm was gone. Continuing their search of the residence, investigators uncovered a chilling document resting on a bedroom nightstand. It was a handwritten note in Denise Miller's handwriting. The letter contained desperate, hopeless language, expressing overwhelming pain, indicating she was contemplating ending her life. On the kitchen island, officers discovered a second handwritten note, short and devastating in its content. Written by Denise, it read, "I am sorry I took both of our lives. Please contact our moms." The investigative picture transformed instantly. Denise Miller was no longer viewed merely as a missing person or potential victim. She was now the prime suspect in the cold-blooded murder of a police officer and a high-risk fugitive, believed to be armed and suicidal. Chapter 9: Memory in the Shadows. An all-points bulletin was issued across Texas for Denise Miller and her vehicle. Law enforcement agencies were warned that she was likely armed with multiple firearms, including a police service weapon, and extremely unstable. That emergency broadcast led directly to the 4 o'clock past midnight discovery at the Gainesville Motel on Saturday, December 11. When Gainesville police and emergency medical technicians breached room 147, they found Denise suffering from the gunshot wound to her forehead, surrounded by alcohol, sleeping pills, and holding a small .25 caliber handgun. Inside her motel room, investigators recovered Wayne Irby's missing .40 caliber service pistol. Upon examining the service weapon, technicians made a fascinating discovery. The police handgun had jammed because a bullet had been forcibly loaded into the magazine backwards, unable to chamber a round from Wayne's service weapon to end her life. Denise had turned to the secondary firearm, a .25 caliber pistol registered to her stepfather, and pulled the trigger. The bullet had entered her forehead just above the eye, fracturing her skull and inflicting severe neurological damage, but miraculously failing to penetrate the vital centers of her brain stem. Inside the motel room, investigators recovered a third handwritten note from Denise. This longer letter detailed her overwhelming emotional turmoil and contained a single, pivotal sentence. She wrote that she had accidentally shot Wayne, panicked completely, and fled the scene. Denise was rushed to a specialized trauma intensive care unit. Texas Ranger Tracy Murphy arrived at her bedside later that afternoon, obtaining medical clearance to conduct a taped interview. Ranger Murphy placed a recording device near her pillow and gently questioned Denise about the events in Little Elm. Denise's physical and mental condition was severely impaired. Her speech was slow and slurred. When asked directly about what had happened to Wayne Irby, Denise appeared confused. She stated she did not believe Wayne was hurt.
When
Ranger Murphy informed her directly that Wayne was dead, Denise shook her head weakly, responding that he was not dead and that she had done nothing to harm him. Denise demonstrated a selective memory. She could recall events from weeks prior and recognized basic details about her life, but possessed absolute amnesia regarding the shooting of Wayne Irby and her subsequent self-inflicted gunshot wound. Medical specialists explained that the combination of severe blunt force, traumatic brain injury from the bullet, massive blood loss, acute alcohol toxicity, and pharmaceutical ingestion had inflicted profound neurological trauma. Furthermore, psychological experts noted that the human mind often deploys extreme dissociative defense mechanisms to block out unimaginable trauma or guilt. However, experienced homicide detectives remained deeply skeptical. Was Denise experiencing genuine medical amnesia, or was she executing a calculated act of deception to avoid a capital murder prosecution? As Denise underwent months of intensive medical rehabilitation, paralyzed on one side of her body and blinded in one eye, the forensic evidence gathered by the Texas Rangers mounted relentlessly. Autopsy results confirmed that Officer Wayne Irby had been killed by a single .25 caliber bullet entering the back of his head. Forensic ballistics matched the fatal bullet directly to the .25 caliber handgun recovered from Denise's hand in room 147. Investigators reconstructed the timeline leading to the murder. Prior incident reports from December 2003 revealed that Denise had previously engaged in a violent domestic confrontation with Wayne when she caught him entertaining another woman at his rental residence. On that occasion, Denise had scratched his face and blackened his eye before later recanting her formal police complaint. Friends of Wayne testified that on Thursday, December 9, 2004, Wayne had definitively informed Denise that their relationship was over permanently and that he was moving back into his rental home for good. Prosecutors argued that upon receiving this final rejection, Denise retrieved her stepfather's .25 caliber handgun, drove to Wayne's rental residence, and confronted him. When Wayne turned his back to walk down the hallway, Denise raised the weapon and executed him from behind. She then took his official service weapon to disarm the household, wrote the confession notes, and fled to Gainesville to execute her own suicide pact. Chapter 10: The Verdict of Silence. In January 2005, while still recovering in a medical facility, Denise Miller was officially arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Her legal proceedings were delayed for 18 months as medical and psychological teams worked to rehabilitate her physical condition and evaluate her legal competency. By July 2006, Denise was declared competent to stand trial, despite retaining no conscious memory of the shooting itself. On July 10, 2006, the trial of the state of Texas versus Denise Miller opened at the Denton County Courthouse. Denise entered the courtroom in a wheelchair, frail, thin, partially paralyzed, and visibly impaired. Her defense team leaned heavily on her fragile appearance and her medical condition, presenting a narrative centered on tragedy and accident. The defense argued that Denise had gone to Wayne's rental home in a desperate, highly emotional state to beg for reconciliation. They asserted that she carried the handgun merely as a tool to threaten suicide in front of him. According to the defense, a chaotic verbal struggle occurred, during which the small handgun discharged accidentally, striking Wayne in the back of the head. Panicked and terrified, Denise fled, convinced she had destroyed her life, which led to her suicide attempt in Gainesville. They pointed to her third suicide note, written in solitude at the motel, where she explicitly stated the shooting was an accident. However, the prosecution, armed with precise forensic science, systematically dismantled the accident theory. State forensic experts presented the .25 caliber handgun to the jury. Engineering tests proved that the weapon required 4.5 to 5 pounds of deliberate trigger pressure to fire. It possessed functional internal safety mechanisms that rendered an accidental discharge from being bumped or dropped virtually impossible. Furthermore, prosecutors emphasized the physical location of the entry wound. Dead center in the back of Wayne Irby's skull. It was forensically impossible for a weapon to accidentally discharge into the exact rear center of a man's head while two people were facing each other in an argument. Prosecutors also highlighted her actions following the shot. If the discharge had been an accident, a woman who truly loved Officer Irby would have immediately dialed 911 or rendered emergency medical aid. Instead, Denise stepped over his bleeding body, stole his police firearm, authored confession notes stating she had taken both of their lives, and drove across county lines to drink alcohol and attempt suicide. On July 12, 2006, after less than 1 hour of deliberation, the jury returned to the courtroom. The verdict was read, guilty of first-degree murder. Denise sat motionlessly in her wheelchair, weeping softly as the verdict was delivered. During the sentencing phase, prosecutors requested a severe prison term, emphasizing that while Denise's self-inflicted injuries were tragic, they did not erase the cold-blooded execution of a dedicated public servant. The judge sentenced Denise Miller to 62 years in state prison. The sentence ensured that Denise would spend the remainder of her natural life behind bars. For the officers of the Little Elm Police Department and the family of Wayne Irby, the long legal journey concluded with solemn justice. The case served as a stark, tragic testament to the destructive power of unchecked romantic obsession and jealousy, leaving two families broken and a dedicated officer remembered in honor. Volume 3, The Broken Promise. Chapter 11, The Missing Freshman. The spring season in Texas usually brings a sense of renewal, particularly for college students anticipating the freedom of spring break. In mid-March 2007, 19-year-old Tanisha Stewart was looking forward to returning home to Houston. Tanisha was a bright, shining star in her family, growing up in a tough, economically challenged Houston neighborhood. As one of 6 children, she had faced hardship early in life when her father passed away. Despite these obstacles, Tanisha excelled academically through pure determination. She possessed a striking natural beauty, a warm, captivating smile, and an independent spirit that inspired everyone around her. Her exceptional academic performance earned her a full scholarship to Texas A&M and M University in College Station, a prestigious accomplishment that brought immense pride to her mother and siblings. During her high school years, while working at a local pizza restaurant in 2005, 17-year-old Tanisha met a 25-year-old coworker named Tim Shepard. Tim Shepard was a quiet, somewhat intense man 8 years her senior. He pursued Tanisha persistently, offering dates and attention until she eventually agreed to go out with him. What began as a casual courtship quickly evolved into a serious, intense romantic relationship. To overcome the age gap and win the approval of Tanisha's protective family, Tim worked diligently to position himself as a helpful, reliable partner. He visited the family home regularly, repaired appliances, fixed computers, and treated Tanisha's mother with utmost respect. The family gradually embraced him as a trusted figure. However, when Tanisha relocated 2 hours away to attend Texas A&M University in the autumn of 2006, the dynamics of their relationship underwent a profound shift. At university, Tanisha's horizon expanded dramatically. She encountered new intellectual challenges, formed diverse friendships, and embraced her growing independence. Tim, remaining in Houston, struggled deeply with this shift. He grew increasingly possessive, demanding frequent phone updates and exhibiting intense jealousy whenever Tanisha engaged in campus social life. In late 2006, the relationship hit a rocky patch, leading to a temporary breakup during which Tim briefly dated another woman. Though they subsequently reconciled, the trust between them had been severely fractured. When Tanisha returned to Houston for spring break on Thursday, March 15, 2007, she intended to split her time between visiting family, seeing Tim, and enjoying social events with her college friends, including attending a major Beyoncé concert over the weekend. On Sunday, March 18, 2007, Tanisha's older sister, Gayla Taylor, received an urgent telephone call from their mother. Tanisha had vanished. She had failed to show up for the concert, had not returned to her mother's home, and was completely unresponsive to cell phone calls. This behavior was entirely unprecedented. Tanisha maintained constant communication with her family. Gayla immediately called Tim Shepard to ask if he knew where her sister was. Tim sounded entirely calm and cooperative on the phone, stating that Tanisha had visited his apartment on Thursday morning, but had walked out following a minor disagreement and had not been seen by him since. Driven by an acute sense of dread, Tanisha's family officially filed a missing persons report with the Harris County Sheriff's Office on Monday, March 19, 2007. Chapter 12. The Two Lovers. Investigators from the Major Crimes Unit immediately began piecing together Tanisha's final known movements. Tim Shepard was summoned to the sheriff's station for a detailed interview. He complied willingly, sitting down with detectives to outline his timeline. Tim explained that he had picked Tanisha up in his vehicle around 3 o'clock in the morning on Thursday, March 15, while driving back to his apartment, Tanisha received a late-night phone call from a young man named Mark Marks. Mark Marks was a 19-year-old fellow college student whom Tanisha had met at university and had begun casually dating during her time at Texas A&M. Mark had called to check on her, unaware she was in a vehicle with Tim. Tim acknowledged to detectives that the late-night call sparked an immediate argument in the car. Upon arriving at his apartment, Tanisha refused to discuss the matter, stating she was exhausted and going to sleep. Tim claimed that when they awoke a few hours later on Thursday morning, he confronted her again regarding her relationship with Mark Marks. According to Tim, Tanisha became annoyed, stated she was tired of his controlling behavior, walked out of his apartment on foot, and departed down the street alone. Tim insisted to detectives that he loved Tanisha, had no idea where she went. After walking out, and was deeply concerned for her safety, he voluntarily granted investigators written consent to search his apartment and vehicle. Detectives executed a search of Tim's apartment. The residence appeared orderly, showing no physical signs of violence, no blood spatter, and no evidence of a struggle. Finding no legal grounds to detain him, detectives returned his keys and released him. Investigators then turned their attention to the second man in Tanisha's life, 19-year-old Mark Marks. Detectives located Mark Marks and brought him in for questioning. Mark was articulate, cooperative, and visibly distraught over Tanisha's disappearance. He readily admitted that he and Tanisha had been dating for about a month at university and were deeply fond of each other. Mark confirmed he knew about Tim Shepard, stating that Tanisha had expressed a firm desire to officially end her long-standing relationship with Tim during spring break, so she and Mark could pursue an exclusive relationship. Mark verified that he had called her at 3 o'clock in the morning on Thursday. However, Mark provided a rock-solid, verified alibi for the time frame of her disappearance. He had departed Houston immediately after that phone call to attend a pre-planned spring break trip with college friends at South Padre Island, where multiple witnesses and receipts confirmed his presence. Mark Marks was completely exonerated. The investigation faced a terrifying void. If Mark Marks was clear and Tim Shepard insisted Tanisha had walked away from his apartment on foot Thursday morning, detectives were forced to consider the horrifying possibility that Tanisha had been snatched off the street by a violent stranger. Search teams, bloodhounds, and volunteers canvassed the dense wooded areas and apartment complexes surrounding Tim Shepard's neighborhood. On one occasion, search dogs picked up a faint scent of decomposition in the nearby woods, but the source proved to be the remains of a dead animal. As days passed without a single trace of the missing college freshman, panic and despair deepened within Tanisha's family. Yet, as officers continued interviewing residents in Tim Shepard's apartment complex, several neighbors began reporting an extraordinarily bizarre series of events that had occurred at Tim's unit in the days following Tanisha's disappearance. Chapter 13. The Smoke on the Patio. Neighbors in the complex reported that beginning on Friday, March 16, and continuing across the entire weekend, Tim Shepard had engaged in an unprecedented, nonstop outdoor grilling marathon. Residents noted that Tim had set up 2 separate barbecue grills on his apartment patio, operating them continuously day and night. The volume of thick, dark smoke billowing from his patio was so intense and relentless that several neighbors grew alarmed, fearing he would set the apartment building on fire. The smoke became so overwhelming that residents had called emergency services. When firefighters and patrol officers had arrived at his apartment during the weekend to investigate the smoke hazard, Tim had offered a smooth, confident explanation. He stated he was cooking massive quantities of meat to prepare for an upcoming large-scale church picnic, claiming he was catering for nearly 200 people. Firefighters who briefly stepped near his apartment doorway recalled observing a large quantity of raw meat soaking in a bathtub filled with water inside his bathroom. Satisfied with his explanation, the fire crew had advised him to control the flames and cleared the scene. However, a secondary detail provided by a neighbor elevated the investigative team's suspicion to extreme levels. A female tenant whose apartment overlooked Tim's patio reported that shortly after the massive grilling sessions concluded, she observed Tim pouring massive quantities of pure chemical bleach across his concrete patio floor. The fumes were so overpowering that they burned her eyes from yards away. He meticulously scrubbed every inch of the outdoor concrete. Detectives began connecting the sinister dots. Why would a man whose longtime girlfriend had just vanished without a trace spend 48 continuous hours obsessively operating barbecue smokers, soaking unknown organic material in a bathtub, and scrubbing his patio with heavy industrial bleach? Tanisha's family became absolute in their conviction. Tim Shepard had murdered Tanisha inside his apartment. Frustrated by the lack of an immediate arrest, Tanisha's sister Gayla reached out to a well-known community activist named Quanell X. Quanell X was a prominent figure in Houston, known for facilitating surrenders and mediating high-profile community crises. Gayla met with Quanell X, explaining the agonizing details of Tanisha's disappearance and her firm belief that Tim Shepard was responsible. Coincidentally, Tim Shepard's own family had also contacted Quanell X around the same time, requesting his assistance to protect Tim from what they claimed was aggressive police harassment. Recognizing he held a unique position of trust, Quanell X contacted Tim Shepard directly and requested a private, one-on-one meeting. Tim agreed, inviting Quanell X to his apartment. When Quanell X arrived at the residence, Tim was visibly trembling, sweating profusely, and displaying extreme psychological stress. Paranoid that law enforcement had placed electronic listening devices inside his living room. Tim requested that they speak inside the small bathroom. Inside the enclosed bathroom, Quanell X looked Tim directly in the eyes. He assured Tim that if he were innocent, he would stand by him against unjust persecution. But then Quanell X pressed him firmly, asking, "Tim, look me in my eye. Did you do something to this girl?" Tim dropped his head, the composure he had maintained for a week completely shattered. In a quiet, trembling voice, Tim offered a horrific confession. He admitted that. When Tanisha confirmed her intention to leave him for Marks, he flew into an uncontrollable rage. As she attempted to walk out the front door, he attacked her from behind, wrapped his hands around her throat, and strangled her to death on his apartment floor. When Quanell X asked what he had done with her body, Tim stated he had placed her remains inside a commercial dumpster located behind a nearby apartment complex. Quanell X immediately contacted major crimes investigator Sidney Miller, arranging for an immediate meeting to bring Tim in and recover Tanisha's body. Chapter 14. The Furnace of Malice. Investigator Sidney Miller and his partner placed Tim Shepard and Quanell X in the rear of their unmarked police cruiser. Guided by Tim's directions,